My name's Sam. I work with Bintani in technical sales and support. My background's in brewing. I know a number of people within the room and a number of new faces. So as Phil has mentioned, we really appreciate this, and obviously, regardless of the time of year, taking time away from your breweries and production facilities should be of value to yourselves. It's a tough business, and we appreciate the time that you've given up to come down here, and in return, we hope we can provide something that you can learn from, enjoy yourselves, and take away and implement one or two things in your brewery that you might find interesting and be of some help within the industry. So I've been asked/stitched up to have a bit of a talk today about a new product from Fermentis, which I think is a really innovative and interesting product that I've had the opportunity to brew with on my little 70-litre grain father on the side here, as well as doing some trials with some brewery friends of ours to have a look at this new strain and to see what it offers. So let's get started. That works. I was using the official Bintani new slide deck, which is a new thing for us, so apologies if things are a little bit small. If there's anything that you can't see or read, please put a hand up, or otherwise I can send you through this amazing information that was put together very professionally by myself. So BR-8, what is it? This is a product that is actually the world's first dried Brettanomyces strain. So a strain that we'll talk in a little bit about, but something that's not too easy to control by itself or to isolate, and to have something available in a dried form has presented some challenges, but presents some opportunities for the brewers as well. We're going to have a quick chat about Brett, a quick little product overview of what BR-8 is, why you might want to use Brett or consider it, and why versus a different type of Brettanomyces you may consider BR-8 as a product. A little bit on how to use. This is a strain that within certain breweries has a different past and reputation. So we've got some guidance from Fermentis as manufacturers on their intended use cases for it, and to provide a bit of practical experience with that. To have some practical chat and honest evaluation. If he makes it here in time, hopefully it's Nick Sandry from Molly Rose Brewing, who's very kindly done a bottle conditioned version of one of the beers today. We'll get up and have a bit of a chat. I'll have a quick chat through some of my primary fermentation co-pitched information with that, and a chat from one of our other brewers that's done some keg conditioning versions with the Brett as well. And have a quick overview of some of the recipes that we've got on today. So we've got 5 different Brett beers on today at the bars, all with different types of fermentation, pitch rates and styles, to give a bit of an overview about what this strain can do. And happily try and answer any questions. Within this presentation, I have stolen's the wrong word, but I've taken a couple of slides from Fermentis' own decks on this. We do have the amazing Fermentis team over on the side of the room. We've got the Asia Pacific Beer Technical Manager, Simon Jean-Pierre, with his hand over here, who is a lovely fellow. I've had a good opportunity to chat a little bit with emails and talks with a wealth of knowledge around anything beer related and fermentation. So if you've got any questions, please feel free to hit up Simon. And a couple of new starters who have just joined in the last little bit. We've got Dr. Tanya Rutan, who's over here. He's got it come from a great background, particularly in wine, yeast fermentation, and particularly around thiol interaction with yeast from the Marlborough region in New Zealand. Incredibly talented and technically minded. And we've also got Anthea Reda, that's right, who's joined as well in the last couple of months. So I know many of you from years back knew and love Ruth, whose name still continues around within craft circles. And I think finally Fermentis have a staffing that may be in some ways comparable. I think Ruth, if you know Ruth, you know what I'm talking about. But it's super exciting to have some new technical staff within the Fermentis team. All right. You'll notice that the Fermentis slides are all nice and animate in really well, so that's a nice little touch that they've been able to do. So what is Brettanomyces? I'll give a quick overview on this. As I said, my background's not as a microbiologist and that sort of thing, more on the practical brewing side. So if I don't know anything, please feel free to pull me up and we can find out some more information. But basically a non-conventional yeast species that has been around for a long time. Brettanomyces actually means British, and myces as fungus. So basically a British fungus, a strain that loves to exist in wood and barrels and other things, as well as in a number of other circumstances. As you can see, it itself can be isolated from a number of different sources, fruits, wood, other things. And while present in a number of different styles, commonly found in a lot of English ales, also Belgian wild and spontaneous fermented beers, alambic gueuze, and also German porter beers randomly. I didn't know a lot about German porter beers until I was studying there and asking one of their microbiology professors the difference between porters and stouts, and his straight up answer was porters always have Brett. And I'd never heard about that, but I was adamant within German porter beers at a low level, always have a Brett as a characteristic in it. So in there. So what is it? It's a microorganism that has a unique fermentation pathway, has some similarities to our Saccharomyces cerevisiae yeast, but does some other things that our brewers' yeast can't do in relation to specific phenols, esters, and aroma compounds. We won't go too deep into that, but we'll have a little bit of a chat around what that looks like. And a little bit of an overview saying that the strain is more geared towards craft brewers for novel productions of flavours. So with anything in the fermentation space, as with all brewing ingredients, our main goal as sort of craft brewers is often to look towards innovative and new and interesting flavours. So the sales pitch part, SafBrew BR-8. This is an isolated Brett Brux species. So from an isolated strain from the Seine Valley in Belgium, so from the area where a number of different strains, particularly for your gueuze, lambic sort of styles, with the wild microflora around exist, has been isolated from there. One of the main things within this strain that got me the first time it was presented to me is obviously, like with different cerevisiae strains, within the Brett realm, there's a number of different fermentation profiles and strains that exist. This strain has been chosen particularly in its use of sugar profiles, and the main call out for me was that it does not assimilate dextrins. So this is a huge part, I feel, for some of the stability within Brett for your primary condition or bottle conditioning. With your residual load of fermentables or dextrins within the bottle, this strain cannot continue to go and evolve and produce CO2, which changes the risk profile a bit around what your risk tolerance is for use of one of these strains in the brewery. From development, it has been selected for its use in secondary conditioning, be it bottle or keg conditioning as a sort of initial use sort of case. That said, we've done a lot of experimentation around with some co-ferment and 100% Brett primary pitches as well to sort of change and expand the flavour profile available. One of the notes that was looked for within this strain was some typical Brett strains. And when we get to have a chance to taste through with these, I think the strain that has been selected does a great job at a neutral Brett profile. So a little bit of horse, a little bit of leather, nothing that's completely crazy phenolic or over the top. There's introduction of a little bit of oxygen as well, not a huge level of acidity from that realm. Just a really nice Brett footprint that over time will develop and age and intensify if used in secondary conditioning. We want to make sure it's robust to re-fermentation, that when we're putting it in at the end of our fermentation with a lower pH, high CO2, it can still do its thing in a reasonable time frame to get us product to market, and also to have no off flavours, so some of those other acids and flavours that Brett can throw out and flavour phenols that might not be desired within it. So yeah, that's a bit of the overview of the product. And again, as well, it's highlighted in red, that assimilation of dextrins is for me the huge call out, so it's not one that can chew away forever in your brewery. So why Brett BR-8? And hopefully this slide will work. You might see over some time what's going on with this Brett is actually going to slowly evolve and change on the slide. So we're looking with what we might start with from our cerevisiae yeast, and particularly on the top if we're using a phenolic strain that might have some clove medicinal notes in it. A lot of the cerevisiae strains also have the esters of the sort of banana, fruity, rose characteristics, and bound terpenes. Some can and can't release some of these terpenes in different sort of ways. So as we sort of see and it comes and changes, what we're doing with the BR-8 slowly over time, be it that or any other Brett strain, is changing some of the phenolic compounds. The Brett itself can change some of the vinyl phenols, so 4-VG and that sort of thing, which is the clove medicinal sort of notes in that. It can actually modify those more into that animal, leather, earthy sort of tones as well. That's, as number one, probably the primary driver of the BR-8 strain, to have a bit of a phenolic interaction and change the profile on that. It can, in other use cases, produce a different range of ethyl esters as opposed to our banana esters. So like ethyl hexanoate with our red apple, ethyl, I think it's octanoate with some pineapple and different sort of flavour profiles there. Particularly if used in primary fermentation, a lot of those pineapple esters come out a little bit more. And to also release some of our bound terpene flavours within our hop compounds for more rose and floral elements that can come out. This little slide, I thought, on the right was just worth putting up. I got to go and hear a Brett presentation 5 or 6 years ago with Chad Jacobson from Crooked Stave, who did his PhD in Brett and had a really interesting talk about it and a number of different strains fermentation conditions. But I thought this was a great expression of what can be achieved within this world of Brettanomyces. So BR-8 focuses particularly a little bit more around the sort of leather, animal blanket sort of characteristics at a clean level. But Brett, we can see clove, we can see that medicinal, the bubblegum characteristic as well in there, some cheese, some isovaleric, some horse, some grape. It's a really huge profile to work with depending on your pitch rates, fermentation conditions, and other strains that you might have working with it. A quick how to use and time frames. Just as an overview, the recommendation for this product is as a secondary conditioning. So we want to have basically a beer fully fermented if we want to use it for secondary conditioning. The recommended pitch rate for basically all standard beers up to about 8.5% ABV is the sweet range for this, to ensure complete fermentation with a maltotriose positive yeast. So if we're dosing this for re-fermentation, we want to know the level of sugars that can be consumed for the level of carbonation produced. We wouldn't recommend this with a strain like S33 or maltotriose negative strains because the Brett will slowly tick away. If it's calculated in, okay, but if not, we can lead to an instance of overcarbonation with it. One part as well, following your primary fermentation, do we remove the Cerevisiae yeast and whatnot? I actually had that question to Simon to try and find out, because obviously if we've still got our yeast in there, it will do a lot of the fermentation even when the Brett is pitched of our dosing sugars. So it can be used either way with that. Even if the sugars and carbonation is produced by the primary yeast, the Brett will still interact over time and change the profile of that beer. So that one's really up to you. The dosing, or by the end of fermentation as well, a lot of your yeast will be dropped out if it's not filtered or centrifuged out, that sort of thing as well. So you can leave it in there or dose completely with the Brett. Rehydrate in, add our sugar as our source of sugar for carbonation to recarbonate. And at that sort of 10 grams a litre of sugar will provide about an additional 5 grams a litre of CO2. So if we know our CO2 concentration of our beer post-ferment, we can dose in our sugar dosage to have an accurate level of carbonation. Pitch the beer at our conditioning temperatures, recommended between 15 and 25 degrees Celsius, and allow the beer to condition and carbonate over a period of 1 month to 3 months plus. The recommendation also, once the product is chilled, to at least give it a 2 or 3 week time to round out the flavours and all settle down once the product is chilled out. So that's as used as a re-fermentation model. Also for primary fermentation, given that Brett itself can have some slower uptake on a primary fermentation if used exclusively, recommendation is to co-pitch at 50 grams a hectolitre, which is a sort of standard pitch rate with a lot of the other fermenter strains. And with the maltotriose positive yeast, again with this one, if we give the Brett its time, it will go through completely and be able to chew it through. But if we want to have it in a sort of more reasonable, practical time frame, we'd want to have a maltotriose positive yeast that can consume that sugar fraction as well to ferment and age as required. This was just a little bit of information from Fermentus' sensory technical department on the characteristics of Brett in aging the beer between 1 and 3 months. Which I found a little bit interesting is this is an analytical timing. So this is, I think they're using the gas chromatograph to basically measure these levels versus the relative agreed threshold for these flavours. So at an odour unit of 1, that's kind of your sensory level perception of these products. So analytically, we've seen within 3 months, basically all the sort of clove medicinal, the vinyl thiols, vinyl phenols, I should say, have reduced down to next to 0, and we've got that change into the ethyl phenols, which is more of that horse barnyardy sort of characteristic between the two different types, ethyl phenol and ethyl guaiacol. A little bit of a change after 3 months analytically. We can see it jumping up a little bit. So that's our analytical from the machines. Down the bottom, we've got the sensory analysis, which is from the sensory board. So a little bit different, even though we're seeing these high levels from the analytics, that within 1 month, we're sort of getting up towards that Brett imprint at a low level, and then within sort of 3 months, it's really getting more towards that presence of Brett in there. So a little bit of guidance towards up to that sort of 3 months point, and this will continue to go for 3 or 6 months as well. Have you seen this guy? He's brewed his Brett beer. If you haven't seen it, check out the ad on YouTube for this product. It is absolutely ridiculous in a good way. Very, very, very French, and very much talking about the life experiences you can have when you use this product. So I can only speak for it so much, but you can be screaming on a beach into the wind if you use it. So it's true. All right. Practical experience and evaluation piece. I'll cut off a bit. This is just to put up as a ferment graph for a couple of beers that I've done with the Brett, which are on our bar out here. Did 2 beers with a sort of a saison sort of palate in mind, a 35 IBU, pretty basic sort of ale grist, and wanted to try out a couple of different things here. So the beer number 1 was as a sort of Belgian-style saison using fermented strain BE-134, which is a diastatic phenolic Belgian strain for really dry beers with a lot of clove sort of esters in it in there. I was keen to use that to see how that would translate into the Brett footprint when they're changed into more of that barnyardy sort of character. And the other beer was the same wort, but with US-05, just as a neutral ale strain. And with that wort, we did a dry hop as well to see how that hop interaction would work, with a bit more of that bound terpene release as well. That was dry hopped with aroma hops. We saw Tom from Glacier Hops Ranch earlier, and Superdelic, new release from New Zealand hops. So both of those are out on the bar here. We've got about 20 litres because it was my little kit, but feel free to have a try. And good or bad, let us know what you think. What surprised me a little bit with that, particularly on the Saison strain, was those Belgian Saison phenolics really evident within the first couple of days, and much in that sort of clove, nice, neutral Saison strain. But then from about day 3 or 4, starting to see the emergence of that Brett footprint through. These were fermented at 25 and 22 degrees Celsius, so a little bit warm, and both within 2 or 3 days had sort of done their primary fermentation. They were a 7-day ferment, at which point, at that temperature, the Brett footprint I felt was quite elevated and at a good point to chill the beers out, and it was a pretty quick primary ferment, so that was interesting. And since then, they've had about 4 months conditioning cold, but have still been pretty good. So yeah, not bad. We've got another base Scotch ale out here, and this was just to report a little bit from another brewery to have a go at it. So, not too much saying, but this was Boat Rocker, who do a lot of different Brett beers and that sort of thing. We wanted to give them a chance to explore, and they used it in their wee heavy. So they've got a base beer with a high residual sugar content, malty and full-bodied, with pleasant aroma. They actually dosed it in 2 dosing rates at a moderate and a high level. We've got the higher level keg on here today. And they said they were happy with the aroma and pleasant. That was just after 5 weeks at ambient conditioning. And so their feedback was a success for keg dose beer. Carbonation's good, pours well with a flow control tap. And yeah, just saying that they found some interest of it within that sort of strain. And then finally, I had in the little one, Nick. Question mark. I wasn't sure if he'd be here, but he is. So we'll give a Nick at Molly Rose. We had a chat and decided he would have a crack at this in a bottle conditioned version, using one of their base beers. I love When Life Gives You Lemons. So a very flavour forward citrus farmhouse style ale, which we should have actually passed out some cans. But we'll have a bit of time that we have them both to have a taste of side by side. So guys, would you be able to help give out some glasses and cans, and people can pour them themselves just down the rows? But Nick, if you're happy to have a chat for 2 seconds while we taste some beers, that'd be lovely. I guess when we're having a bit of a taste side by side, and even if this is afterwards we run over a bit, we can still go just have the taste. I guess it was a bit of a limited time frame, but I guess what I was going to ask was what sort of led you maybe to the choice of beer for dosing, and you do other bottle conditioned sort of versions of a number of your products, whether there was similarities or differences versus some of the other conditioning you're doing with it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we dosed at about 20 grams a heck, so a little bit higher than the bottle conditioning. So a little bit up. I decided to choose lemons because we had it on hand at the time, and instead of pulling something else out of a barrel and then trying to bottle it and then having all of these other competing Bretts and flavours and sourness, decided to use our core range farmhouse ale, which has got a lot of kind of farmhouse character to it already. Clove, phenol, spice, earthiness. So it's actually something I've been thinking about for a while, is bottle conditioning and can conditioning with this beer as it was to try and lift the characters. So when you came along with the Brett, I thought this is a great idea to bang it in a bottle and throw in some Brett. So we did that in December. So, I mean, it's had 2-ish months to kind of develop. And I tasted it back in January as well. So it's definitely developed from there. But I think most of the work was done in about the first 6 weeks.
Yep.
So it worked really quickly. And in comparison, so what we did was actually carbonate the beer to about 4 grams per litre CO2, and then just dosed enough sugar to get another 1.5 and the Brett. So it did a little bit of work in the bottle, but not heaps. So you'll taste the beers, and When Life Gives You Lemons is quite bright, and it's quite citrusy and lemony and vibrant. It's got a little bit of a herbal, dry hop, thyme character to it too. In comparison, I think When Life Gives You Brett is a lot more leaning towards the leathery forest floor. I wouldn't say funk. I don't necessarily get funk myself. But it's definitely got more of that earthy farmhouse, fresh cut hay character.
Nice, it's a beautiful, beautiful beer. Actually, without having the base beer on it, one thing I like on the flavour of it is kind of something of that almost like rose lavender kind of thing. Is that more from Brett, you think, or is that part of the base beer?
I think that could be secondary product from maybe the interaction, because it's dry hops with some modern hops. So I think maybe they are being developed further on by the Brett, and also maybe the play of, because it's a complex beer. When Life Gives You Lemons, you got lemon zest and lemon juice with a fruity farmhouse beer and also dry hop. So it's really hard to tell what's giving you what character, even in the base beer. And then with the Brett thrown in on top, it's even harder to figure out what's happened where. I think something that's really cool in this one too, I just cracked a fresh bottle of it out there and had a taste. And the texture of the beer, it's developed this creaminess that you get from long-aged Brett beers. So it's got this beautiful kind of nutty creaminess. Bottle conditioning helps that, obviously, normally, but I think the Brett has contributed a little bit of extra kind of, I don't know, pizzazz to the mouthfeel.
Awesome. Cool. Well, yeah, we'll have a chat, and maybe at the end, once we've had a chance to go through, we can pass around a mic for some feedback. But I really, really appreciate the beer, and tasting it first time on stage is always good fun. But as I don't need to pretend with your beers, it's amazing. You do a great job. So thank you so much.
Thanks, mate. And anyone has any questions, feel free to pop up and say hi.
Sweet. Thanks so much, Nick. So as a bit of an overview just on what we have, if you would like to try something with the BR-8 in it today, we have Nick's bottle conditioned farmhouse ale, which is up the ABV a little bit at 4.6%. We've got a conditioning time of 3 months, also with a control, and then we've got the base beer as well there to try. We have a key conditioned version of a Scotch ale on here, which is out on our sort of Brett bar on this sort of side. 5 weeks in there. It was a 6.5% base Scotch ale wee heavy that's then had a Brett treatment at about 16 grams a hectolitre equivalent. We've also got some cans of that out there as well if you'd like to try the base. Those couple of beers that we've done in our little kit out here is the co-primary ferment. And then also another one, because brewers will do what they want to do. One of the brewers we shared it with wanted to do Brett propagation. So because of the release timing on that, decided to try and propagate up some Brett from the packs in it there. One thing which we were talking about with this sort of beer as well, it does change a little bit in that any background Cerevisier that is normally dominant over the Brett. So when you're propagating it up on those sugar sources, the balance of the different microorganisms does change a bit with there. So keeping that in mind, but as 100% propagated, fermented 8.1% hoppy Brett ale. So that's another good one out on the bar here as well. And I think we're sort of on time. I was just going to throw it over for any questions or feedback if anyone had about that. As an overall show of hands on has everyone had a chance to get the the breaded version of the beer yet, or is it still the standard one? No. So no one has any feedback because I haven't had it yet. So that's good. It's great. But in the interest of sort of going on, we'll keep that passing through and around. Have we got the bottles going around? Cool. So Seamus and a few others are cruising around at the moment. So please feel free to enjoy and have a lovely beer with that one. And unless anyone has anything else, come and see myself or the Fermenters team later on, and we'd be happy to have a chat or just try some great beers with you and see. Just before I wrap up, I just want to say a huge thanks, as we sort of said, for everyone's time in coming down, to the brewers that have produced beers for today. We wanted to try and make this, obviously, showcase of new and novel ingredients. So we've got about 20 beers between cans and on draft that are hopefully showing things that either are new in the market, have been used in a different way, or something to sort of provoke some thought and interest with it. As a couple of favourites as well, one that was a late addition featuring a New Zealand hop beer that we had at Ballarat Beer Festival. We tasted last weekend. I've got my little cup down there that I thought was amazing. So if you're looking for something lower ABV, featuring Nectaron from New Zealand hops on our sort of pale ale IPA bar here at 3.4%, definitely give that one a go if you're looking to pace yourself throughout the day. Otherwise, I'll hand over to whoever's next, and thank you so much. Cheers.